We have been planning this with the ASU Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, Dr. Lois Brown and her amazing team for months. We always kind of look at themes each year, and just in the various conversations that we've had with the artists and different ideas that came up, that's how we came up with Race, Arts, and Understanding this year. So I hope you really enjoy everything that we have to offer you for tonight and tomorrow. I first want to acknowledge the Director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, Dr. Lois Brown, and her staff, Debbie, Teresa, Amelia, and Kyler, as well as the Art Center administrative staff. Bernadette, Kelly, Liz, JD, Jeff, Jillian, and Kristen are our administrative staff, so let's give them all a And we have Phil in the SEG. He's one of our gallery staff, so if you hop over there, say hi to Phil. Lois and her team have been just a joy to work with. We appreciate all of their support on everything we've been doing. While Lois has been she was really involved in vision and sound even before we got involved with it. But last year we really took it to a new level, partnering with them on the first symposium that we held up here in Sedona, and it was wonderful. We really loved it. Everyone that participated in it was blown away, and we hope that this will be the start of many projects to come, which we're already talking about. So before I go any further, I want to bring Lois up to just say a few words.
Hello, everybody. It's the teacher in me. I know. Good afternoon, and if there's nothing, I have to raise them up. So it's really good to get a response from you. We're so very glad to be here in Sedona, celebrating another really inspiring year of vision and sound programming. And on behalf of all of us at the center, I want to thank Julie and the team and everyone here for really coming out to support art, to think about art in Arizona, but then also to really think about race, art, and understanding. So Norma and Michael Cunningham envisioned an Arizona in which African American artists could thrive, that they could be seen, and that they could become partners in how all of us think about creativity, history, society, conflict, and culture. It's been such an honor to see your work, and we look forward to talking with you about the influences, the histories, and the innovative techniques that really shape and fuel your work. At the center, we have a programming umbrella called Race, Arts, and Democracy, and I do believe that vision and sound is a jewel in that crown. The events in the series provide us with opportunities to think deeply and strategically, too, about how art not only bears witness to issues of race and democracy, but also how it intensifies and advances our engagement with those persistent and sometimes besieged concepts. So today and tomorrow will be grand, I'm sure of it, and turn it back to Julie. Thank you.
So before we go any further, I want to acknowledge our terrific board of directors. We have Bruce, Melissa, Gwen, Izzy, Darla, Ed, and Timmy. And Timmy and Bruce are here tonight, and I'd like to bring up Bruce Peak, our chair of our board, to just say a few words.
That's easier than trying to raise I promise to keep this short. Welcome to the 9th episode of Vision and Sound, and the 3rd year that Sedona Art Center has been able to participate with this wonderful program. I'm pleased to tell you that in 2022, the board of directors spent a lot of time here at the Art Center revamping our strategic plan, and this is the only organization that I work with as a nonprofit that actually looks at that strategic plan on a regular basis, and we try to activate it. There were 2 elements of that strategic plan that we are accomplishing tonight. Goal number 3, stimulate arts education and lifelong learning. Goal number 4, spark participation and build a diverse and vibrant community of artists, art educators and audiences. I never want to repeat myself, but I had a quotation last year that a number of people came up to me afterwards and talked to me about it. And so, at the risk of being repetitious, I want to put this quote out for consideration. Again, this is from Glenn Brown, professor of art history at Kansas State. And he said, "The arts become a repository of tradition, history, and memory, and create the imperative of remembrance." And that, I just have found that so powerful, and I have not forgotten that over the years. So welcome. We look forward to the program, and we certainly look forward to your comments and feedback after the symposium. Thank you and welcome.
So in addition, obviously, to thanking and acknowledging our wonderful team, really at the core of our program, of course, is our vision and sound artists. This program wouldn't be what it is without them. So Isse, Maloi, Dorrell, Bradford, George Welch, Jerome Fleming could not be here tonight, but he's here I know he's here in spirit. Jacqueline, Chanda, Amber Doe, Debra, Edgerton, and Chip Thomas. If you all could raise your hands and be acknowledged. And the additional artists who are part of our exhibit, so we actually are partnering with the City of Peoria and the City of Goodyear on this program. And the additional artists are Patricia Bohannon in memory, Bob Martin, Michael Cunningham, and Sheree Williams. So I just wanted to let you know who they are as well. And none of this would happen without our sponsors. So they're critical to making all of this happen. So the ASU Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, the Arizona Community Foundation, the Best Western Arroyo Roadway Hotel and Creekside Villas, the City of Goodyear, the City of Peoria, the Kling Family Foundation, and the Arizona Commission on the Arts. Let's give all of our sponsors a huge And as you immerse yourself in the experience over the next few days, you can share what you learn on social media using the hashtags Vision and Sound, Sedona Arts Center, and CSRD at ASU. CSRD at ASU, okay? So we're going to show, Lois talked a little bit about Norman and Michael Cunningham, the founders of Vision and Sound, but before we do that, I just wanted to give you a little history on how Vision and Sound got to Sedona. So and on Vision and Sound in general. So it started in 2016 with a small exhibition of Michael Cunningham's work at the West Valley Arts Council. And after that year, Norma and Michael both really wanted to expand it and to bring a voice to Arizona African American artists in particular. And so it went on for many years at West Valley. And then when my husband and I returned to Arizona, I knew Norma back then. I was the executive director of the West Valley Arts Council for 8 years, and I knew Norma from day one, and that was in 2004. So I've known her for almost 20 years. Well, 20 years. And so when we came back, we've stayed in touch all these years, and when we came back to Arizona, Norma, Michael, and my husband and I were having lunch with them, and Norma was telling us about the history of Vision and Sound because she started it after I left. And everything that she had done, and it was really, truly remarkable. But she was looking for a new home for it, and I knew that I wanted to create more diverse programming in Sedona this was before I even started my job. It was like a week before. And so I think we both looked at each other at the same time, and it struck us, oh my gosh, let's do it in Sedona. So she and I immediately started talking about it, and that's kind of where it began. So that's why this year is the 9th year for Vision and Sound, but the 3rd year that it's here in Sedona. So if that makes sense. And I know Norma's been experiencing some health issues, so she wasn't able to be here tonight. But we grabbed them on Zoom, and both she and Michael, who's always entertaining, and by the way, some of his prints are in the, he hasn't been creating art in a while. He is a chef, he's a professional chef, and he's been completely consumed with that. So we're trying to get him back in the studio, hopefully soon. But some of his prints are for sale next door, just so you know that. So, Debbie, would you like to show the film?
Well, it's been a fabulous 9 years. Our program has grown tremendously, and we are so delighted. Goodyear has a great showing also. There are a number of other cities that are going to participate, and we are looking forward to seeing you. The program will be videoed, and you'll be able to, if you're not able to come to Sedona for the opening and the symposium, you'll be able to see it on video. Wished we were there, but this year it's a little tricky to get out of Goodyear. But we love you, and we will see you next year. Will be our 10th year anniversary celebration. Thank you again, and we'll be listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to Vision and Sound 2024. I'm so excited about you all participating and all of the effort that you put into making this event possible for this year. Unfortunately, Norm and I are having some challenges and we can't participate this year, but we look very forward to seeing you all in the very near future. Thank you so much.
That's the first time I've seen that, so it was great to see. Great to see them. It's been a while since I've seen Norma. So, question number 1 is, yes, how did you become an artist? So, how did you become an artist? You can start, Debra.
My mom used to do Sumi drawings for my sister and I. And it was the first recollection that I ever had of art, was her doing these very delicate ink wash drawings for us. And both my sister and I actually did go into art. We actually started more on the commercial end, and I realized probably within maybe 6 months that was not a good look for me. So I stayed there long enough to pay off all my bills, and then went into the gallery direction, which led me into teaching, and I think that's where I am now.
Before you pass, before you pass the mic, if you could just say your name and introduce yourself, just a little bit about yourself as well, and we'll ask each of you to do that as you take the mic.
Okay, my name is Debra Edgerton. I'm currently an assistant professor at Northern Arizona University in the School of Art. As I mentioned before, I've been doing art as long as I can remember. It wasn't until I started college that I wanted to go into art, but I've always had a love for art and architecture because I love math. I thought that that was the direction I was going to go in, but ended up, by happenstance, going into art. I have 2 areas of interest. One is identity politics. But the other is freshwater ecosystems, especially as it relates to the Colorado Plateau. So I am currently working on a new body of work that deals with definitions of community in ecosystems and how I can use that to relate to African Americans' contributions to the construction of the United States. And so just had a chapter in a book that is going into production, and I'm working on the art for it for an upcoming show in spring of 2025.
Should I do the introduction part first? Okay. My name is Amber Doe. I'm currently a Night Bloom Grant recipient through the Andy Warhol Foundation, and I am completing my fellowship through ASU, currently of the Projecting All Voices Fellowship. Two things converged at once, and I think that's what made me become an artist. My maternal uncle did extensive research on our family history previous to Ancestry and Me and 23andMe. He just did old-fashioned research based on things we had in our home. We knew that his great-great-grandfather served in the Civil War, and we had his discharge papers, and so he took them down to South Carolina and was able to figure out exactly the family that we were descended from in terms of slavery. He knew exactly where it was, the plantation, the name of the owner, the cash crops other than the slaves there, cotton, indigo, and rice. And I think learning that in conjunction with a trip that I took with my father when I was 7 to the Musée d'Orsay is why I became an artist. I saw Manet's portrait of Olympia, and I was more curious about the background and life story of her black maid, because she was clearly in the background, and her mistress was in the foreground, and I sort of saw a tie and connection to whatever her story might be to what my ancestor stories might be, and I think that's totally why I became an artist.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Chanda, full-time artist living in Tucson, Arizona. I call myself, I'm just a painter. I paint in oils. When I was 7, apparently, I did a drawing of my mom, and it looked like her. And so my mother was all excited and said, "Oh my God, look what she did." And from that point forward, I was like, it's kind of the one thing that kind of touches you and says, "Ooh, I've got something special. Look at me, I can do this." And my parents then, every Christmas and birthday, would buy me art supplies, from paint by numbers to whatever it is you could think of. And so from that age of 7, I thought about art and thought about becoming an artist. I lived in Detroit at that time in the 4th grade. They still had an art program, and we actually had classes where you learned about art history, you learned about artists, and that just fueled my desire even more. And then with support of parents who turned our one-car garage into my little studio, where I was able to produce things. I would replicate paintings from old masters and things like that. So it was a natural choice. I know you mentioned math, because my entrance into college was either to major in math or art. And I wound up taking art because I got a scholarship in art. So I went to UCLA as an undergraduate. But as things would have it, when you're coming into those ages of being an artist, people say, "Oh, well, you have to make a living, you're not going to make a living, they're starving artists." I went into education. And so my previous, let's say, full-time career was as an educator, teaching teachers to make art and to do art kind of things. But now I'm full-time, and I look back on those times and wonder, in my 20s, would I have been able to manage? And probably yes, I could have. It would have been more of a struggle than it is now for me. But yeah, I've always wanted to be an artist, and I think that initial foray as a 7-year-old doing a drawing just kicked off, and that, you know, the desire was, I want to be a full-time artist, and here I am now.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Dorrell Bradford. I'm from South Phoenix. I'm a photographer, full-time photographer, and I'm a bit reluctant to call myself an artist amongst these great artists that I've gotten to speak with, because my origins was mostly because of my father, and in many ways because he loved to do pencil drawings and water painting drawings around the house, and he also was a bass player. And so my sister really took to drawing, and she would create lots of drawings, and we all praise her for her drawing work. So, and I always look at that as being an artist, but I love music, and I love to create music, and so my dad made a studio room for me where I would go and produce music all the time and make things. And I had this real connection with imagery and sound. And as I grew older, I started to focus on, I got a camera. He gave me my grandmother's Minolta film camera, 35 millimeter, and which he had made a promise to her that he would take portraits to everybody, to take portraits of everyone in our family with, and then he passed it on to me, and he said, you have to take pictures with it now. And so I started to look at how sound and imagery influenced me, and then I started to lean really into how I was moved by moments, and how I'd like to translate that and try to see if other people that would see these images and would feel something. And not necessarily what I felt, but I felt like striking moments is a way of communicating with humans, no matter what, with word and without word, but just striking moments are something that is special to all of us. And so I started to develop my abilities with photography. I moved to New York, and there I spent many days, because fortunately I met a person who would do the repairs on images in the MoMA, and I worked maybe 2 blocks away from the MoMA on Fifth Avenue. And he gave me a free 2-year membership, and I could go in and bring someone with me every day. So I would go every day and check out different exhibitions, because I find that the MoMA is not good in one trip. You have to spend many days in there to truly appreciate what's going on in there. And through that, I got a really deep education as to how art impacts people. And through that time spent there, and just my time with all the people that I got to connect with there, spending a lot of time around in small galleries, learning about people like David Hammonds and all of my favorite photographers like Wolfgang Tillman, Jürgen Teller, and that really helped me to develop my eye and helped me to focus on, you know, making images that I thought would be impactful for people. And so if I were to call myself an artist, I feel like now I'm starting to find that and find my ability within that, and I really am appreciative to be here in front of all of you guys and amongst these artists here, so that I can learn and be able to develop my craft as I've been doing. Thank you all.
Good afternoon or evening, wherever we're at right now. My name is Isse Maloi. I've been painting professionally since 05. Self-taught, probably kindergarten. I was painting in class, and when I looked over my shoulder, all the kids and the teacher were behind me, like in awe. I didn't know anything more than I thought it looked better than the other kids, but nothing more than that. I didn't think anything more of it. And then as I stayed, was in elementary school, 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd grade, my art teacher, Mrs. Karen Cross, she was like, hey, you got talent. I mean, school you on some things. And so she introduced me to art in a different way. I started looking at artists and seeing what they're doing, and just trying to find my own way. And as I did art more, obviously my talent got better. At this time, we had an art program that was across the, I had a bus there. It was for 7th and 8th grade. I was in 5th grade when they put me into this. And I stayed in there for 4 years, and I had teachers that developed my art skills. And at this time, I'm not thinking I was an artist. I was just a kid who knew how to move a brush, knew how to make things out of clay. It wasn't nothing special to me. It was my talent. I didn't look at it as anything different than something I was capable of doing. As I got older, I never looked back on art. I pretty much, was a teenager, did what teenagers did, rode my skateboard and went to the mall, hung out with friends, and didn't do much of art. Then one day I was in the Navy and I was watching TV and I realized that I was watching TV every day, American Idol. And I was just like, I'm really wasting time watching TV. I was like, and I remembered I could draw. I was like, I thought I could draw. Let me see if I can still draw. And I started drawing in 04, and then I realized that it was something that I've been missing and I loved, and I started doing it again, and I picked up a brush and started painting, because that's what I left high school with, being able to paint. And I just started painting again. And again, I never still call myself an artist. Probably about maybe 2-3 years ago, I was able to call myself an artist. It was a hard thing for me to say, because through my whole life, it was just a talent. It was nothing more than a talent. It was a hobby. I always had to work a 9 to 5. I still work a 9 to 5, so I don't look at it as like I don't get home and wake up and get to paint. I wake up and go to work. It seems like I'm an ordinary guy, so ordinary guys aren't artists. I don't live and breathe this stuff, so I gotta make a living, and art's not paying the bills, so I go to a job. So, probably about 2 years ago, I've been able to call myself an artist, and with this, trying to be an artist, what I've been doing in Phoenix is I do my own shows. It was hard for galleries to come to me and say, hey, I like your work, let me present you. So that wasn't happening. Even when I sold myself as an artist and showed people what I did, I still would get, nah, I'm good. So what I would do is just, I created friends at certain places, and I would grab other artists and put on my own shows. And I've been doing that for the last 6 years, and I've been doing my own shows, doing group shows, putting them on by myself, and doing all the curating, grabbing all the artists, finding the spots. And that's been good to me because it's able to bring other artists that don't know how to get out there to be seen. And I met a lot of great artists who've shown for the first time on a wall because I found them and asked them if they would like to be part of an art show. So it's kind of like me playing it forward. I wish somebody was like, it's kind of like my art teachers in elementary school was saying, hey, you got talent, let me try to cultivate this in you. And that's what I'm trying to do in my community back in Phoenix. So, but yeah, I finally got the courage to call myself an artist professionally because I get paid for it now. When I sell something, But that's me, and what I think of art. That's how I started being an artist. Just doing it in my own time, and people seeing that I had talent, and pulling me aside and say, hey, let's see if we can do something with your talent. Thank you.
My name is Chip Thomas. I am a Lois Sedona. I come to you most recently from Flagstaff this afternoon, but originally I'm from North Carolina. My story is, the short story, the government paid for me to go to medical school for 4 years. I went to Meharry Medical College, Nashville, Tennessee. The government, I keep saying the government, I had to, rather than owing money when I finished my training, I had to work in a health shortage area, and I had a friend from Meharry who was at a small clinic a couple hours north of Flagstaff. So I went there in 87 and just finished in this past August. But during my time out on the Navajo Nation, I built a home darkroom. I started taking photographs actually when I was in the 8th grade. That was my first time getting to go into a darkroom. But from 8th grade until I went to the Navajo Nation in 87, my camera was always in an auto setting, autofocus, auto shoot. I didn't know what I was doing. So I decided to woodshed. I was in an isolated spot, and I took the time to learn photography, black and white, and I was influenced by the photographers I saw in Life magazine as a kid growing up. So I started going and spending time with people in the Navajo Nation in their homes, or as they were herding sheep or feeding animals, and just documenting some of what I was seeing to the extent people were comfortable with that. But I always had a love for street art and graffiti. I was doing my family practice residency in West Virginia in the early 80s, and it wasn't that far from New York City, so I'd go into the city looking for painted trains or whatever. But yeah, so in 2009, I had a life-changing moment in Brazil, where someone showed me the work of the French artist J.R., who had done an installation in Rio the year before of women's eyes pasted onto the sides of their home, looking down into the wealthy beaches of Rio. But for me, it was mind-blowing because it was the marriage of both documentary black and white photography and street art. So when I came back, I used some DIY energy to figure it out, and I started, an art project out of the Navajo Nation. One of the better parts of it, actually, I did a thing called the Painted Desert Project in 2012, where I started inviting street artists from around the world to come out, spend time in the community, and then paint murals, but also teach. So that's an ongoing effort.
George Welch, I just retired about 15 years ago from having taught at Kima Community College in Tucson, Arizona for 40 years. And I'm really a New Yorker in exile. I did not want to leave New York, but I did want to leave my father's residence very early on. My mother was sick with tuberculosis, and then in those days it was like, this we're talking about the 50s and 60s. It was like AIDS or something where you couldn't have family around you. So for 8 years I could only see her once a month for 7 years. But at any rate, when she did come home, she was crying because Dad was kind of a hyper dude. And I was sort of an autistic kid, but I wanted my mother, and I didn't really agree much with Dad because he wanted me to be kind of a scientist or accountant or something like that. And he never really thought art was very entertaining. And because in New York, art was like you're very high or you're out, you're very European on it. And in the black community, if you're going with something, a box of paints or something, somebody thinks you have something in it. And it's difficult to go back and forth to school or taking violin lessons or, any kind of music lessons because they think that, oh yeah, you're one of those people. So I saw my mother as some kind of a goddess, and that was probably a wrong thing, but I didn't know any better. And she, when I was 10, she was doing therapy for herself, coming out of the sanatorium. And she would do her work in this room, away from my father. And I would watch her, and I'd say, well, why are you doing the hand, and why are you doing the eye so many times? Why do you keep erasing and putting it back? And I would scribble stuff. I'm watching Dick Tracy, looking at Ebony magazine, and look, and Dick Tracy had his watch, and the arrow was coming out, and I'm saying, man, we're going to do that, we're going to do this thing, we're going to go to Mars and the moon, and all this other stuff. And you got science fiction, I took over my mind, my imagination. So at that point, I was in a science fiction mood when I wanted to be a bohemian, I wanted to be a Renaissance, all the stuff they didn't teach in school at the time. They didn't go into very much detail. And my family was from, father's side was from Georgia, and he would take me down and stay with my grandmother, and I'd be like, they call me colorblind. That was a problem because they would have to keep pulling me back. You don't do that, you won't go in. I said, well, I want to pee. Don't get out of the car, put it in this spot. So this is a whole thing where I want to go back to Manhattan. I want to go back to New York, where they don't give a shit who I am and what I'm doing, and if I'm carrying a brush or something, they think maybe I'm manicuring or something, but I'm getting away. Dad thought it was bad, and all of a sudden, Vietnam bells started to ring, and I was wandering around, and me and all my buddies, everybody signs up to go, because, want to get away from family. But at any rate, I learned when I was 10, I learned to paint from my mother watching her, and then my godfather gave me a box, and I sort of said, well, I guess this is my way out of here. So I painted a bridge, water going under the bridge, and clouds and trees, and that's where you want to go. And I gave him, and he thought it was kind of cool. Dad, did that kind of thing. So Vietnam was fine for him because he went to World War II, which didn't help him. And so I decided that, I need to do it on my own. So I told him, look, I just don't want to do this thing anymore, whatever you want me to do. He said, well, you go out and you work for a living. I said, okay, but you're paying rent while you're here. I said, oh yeah, but I'm good. I'm just getting ready to go to 18 years old. I said, oh, that's good. And so I went to, this is a long story, I went to night school and I went to Pratt Institute and studied and went, worked my way up in a printing company in Long Island City, Queens Litho. And I didn't go, I was a messenger boy. And I was on a group, a team, messenger boys, and they would go to 42nd Street and they'd go to the topless bars. They'd waste time throwing things in the street, And this is awkward going to these publishing companies. And I would do the thing, and I'd be on time, and I'd come back, and they'd say, hey, you got this. Come on, we can do an apprenticeship program for you. And so that's how I went through the hard way, going to Pratt and doing an internship, apprenticeship, and staying out away from the house a lot, as much as I could. Libraries were my escape, through high school and elementary school, Catholic boy. And, that was a good point for me, was libraries and quiet places for me. And I like to scribble and do little things on the side, but they were kind of weird figures. Surrealism came in from there. And when my mother did come out from some time, she would take me to the museum, Metropolitan Museum. And I'd see, I guess Monet was my big one, Monet. And I just sort of drifted into the water thing. Somehow water stayed with my theme almost all the way through my experiences. I didn't know why or how. I really wanted to be a poet and a musician, but that wasn't paying more money than be a painter. So, out of Vietnam, ideas, going through ROTC and those other stuff. I was in trouble there. I always asked questions. Even all my courses, I said, well, in biology and psychology, can't we put psychology and biology together and figure out how to motivate people without having to take it? I said, no. So all my courses, I did that until I got to painting classes. And I went to Central State University, Black University in Wilberforce, Ohio. And they let me go because I had Pratt, many years of Pratt, so they gave me a year ahead. But what I did was I outworked everybody in the classroom. So he said, why don't you just do separate things and get out of the way? And so that happened. And then suddenly I was getting ready to graduate. And he said, well, now I want you to do what I want. And I said, no, I don't think I'm going to do what you want me to do. At this point, I want to graduate. He said, well, you're not going to get all those A's. I said, of course I'm okay, I don't care. In most of my classes, I did that. I said, give me whatever grade you want to give me until I can go out. Because I want to do some other work that doesn't have anything to do with this other stuff. And that's the way I got through. And so I had to get, because of Vietnam, I had to get deferment, occupational, and I had to work in special service schools in Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant. And I was there during riots, I was there during a lot of upheavals and people beating up students, and corporal punishment was really the thing, and black people trying to be white people, and white people were trying to be superheroes. So it was kind of weird, and I became a social worker out of all that. And then that became I became a social activist, a civic activist, which is another problem. So every situation I approached, I had a sketchbook, and I would just keep sketching and talking and sketching. Every meeting I'd go to, I'd be sketching and listen to them talk and doing poems and cartoons and moving them around and making sure they didn't see what I was doing. When they gave me a question, I would look at the cartoon and look at the poem and say, yes, and this is where we go. We jump from here to there. We don't have to go around this long. And then go, okay. So they let me go again until they found out that I really knew something that they didn't know, and that was Bradford. And so my student teaching was sort of, I had to get out of social services, of course. I won't say why, but they figured I wasn't going to follow the rules. So I got out of that, which meant I was going to either go to Vietnam or work somewhere, so I had to get into education. I had to teach in special service schools. So they put me in the middle of schools where kids had heroin things in their cases. And I was trying to prevent them from doing that, and a lot of teachers didn't like the students, didn't want to teach. And I didn't smoke, and everybody's in smoking coffee mode, and then they go out to teach, and they were angry when they left, angry when they came to teach. And the kids would come to my room and sit down with me, and the teachers would say, well, look, those are my kids. What are they doing in your room? Why are you giving them this stuff? You know, you're laughing. That's my. So every job I had, it was that kind of thing where I got to the point where I needed to figure out how to clear and get myself out before I get fired, and that's what it was. So my thing, I got to go further. But like pregnancy was 9 months. I always gave myself 9 months before I would think ahead of where the hammer was going to go, salary and job security. So I'd just be ahead of that wave constantly each time. And lucky enough, I got my bachelor's and my master's ahead because they knew I knew something, and And so at Pima College, I started out with the beginning of Pima College at the airport at the West Campus. So they didn't have classrooms were in little boxes, relocatable boxes, and the math was all on top of social services and science. And I loved it. I loved the chaos. I loved the feeling that there was no real answer because people were too fearful. And so we started looking and talking, having a good time, and this was doing everything longhand. And the students stayed longer, and it became something where, yeah, we can put a sink over there, we can put a window over there. And so they helped us, because they didn't know what else to do, they let us take a little charge of that. And that's how it's kind of worked over the time period until, of course, that didn't work either. But I stayed with it, became politically involved. The reason I left New York was because I was a social advocate in the Chelsea district under Giuliani, prosecutor. And so we got, there were some problems that we had with that because I didn't know that they knew that I didn't think that drugs in people's business and stolen goods in people's houses, I didn't think that that was fair, and other people felt that was pretty much protocol. So I love Circuit Code because one of the movies was Circuit Code, and those kinds of movies where the good guys get, you get on the line and everybody understands that there is a difficult way of doing things. And so those are the kinds of things that I met with, and Pima was the only place that was soft for me. So I had to leave New York, and I had to make sure I wasn't going to go to Florida, because that was an opportunity I had from the NYU people. And that was under the Ford Foundation, so they kind of didn't want me to soil anything either. So I figured Arizona was pretty cool. But I was still a science fiction person, still going to the Harlem Renaissance, and still going to the Bohemian idea, and knowing that the surrealists were crazy, but so were the poets and so were the painters. So welcome to disorderly order, and that was my concept. And Phyllis, my wife, understands that, and that's why we get along quite well. There's a certain amount of disorder and discomfort which is necessary to provide the images that you see yourself in a reflective mirror. And other people see that reflective mirror. They don't necessarily have to see you through the eyes. One eye doesn't go the same way as the other eye. That doesn't work like that. One hand is not the same hand as the other, not the same size and curvature. No. The body is not the way we'd like it to be in our dreams. No. But it's fantastic, and we can stretch and pull and find ourselves being stretched and pulled into other people's spirits through the elements of design, which elements and forces of nature, which nurtures us. Unfortunately, we have problems nurturing back nature these days. And so that was a force that came into contact with me, and it put me in connection with my mother, and it made me see that I was not like my father. And so I didn't have to. He said, well, when I get old, you kill me. Here's your gun. And he's like that kind of a guy. Corporal punishment was good. I know people don't talk about that here from the old days, but beating was a good thing back in the old days. And the switches and all that stuff was good in the 50s. Chip. And so going down to my grandma's was kind of difficult in Georgia, Waycross, Georgia. It was very difficult because of corporal punishment. They never beat me because I was very gentlemanly and very cool, but they wouldn't want me to walk on the other side of the street. And they wouldn't want me to mix too far, so I grew up with that. And you know, my mother would say, well, make sure you have clean underwear. If you're going, clean underclothes. If you're going to that party, you're going to Harlem, you're going to take the bus and the train, make sure when you get back, because if something happens to you and they pull your pants down, make sure you got some money in your socks. Make sure your drawers are clean so they don't think you're a bum. And those kinds of things, it's little tads that you, and then say, oh, just pick that. Yeah, I'm from 6'2". I wasn't big enough to say I'm going to be able to do that. So if I went to a party, with a party with some guy that was a little bigger than me. When I went to a party with somebody I had a little trouble on subway. Yeah. And you know, if I saw somebody manhandle a woman, I try to do that, get them off, and then jump off the next stop. I was in fraternities, and we do this little stuff and drag, and get the girls crazy. And I said, no, these are women, these are girls, these are married. No, man, come on, drink this, and she's going to do this. I said, no. But, that's old school. But somehow I didn't have, some of my mind didn't work that way. I felt that there's a value to everyone's life and the animals as well. I had friends who killed little animals and watched them suffer. Well, that's the thing, you can't do that. So I can't tell you all the stories of the world.
I think you give us Professor Georgie, I think
Okay,
you piqued our interest so much, and I think now we all have a taste of what's coming tomorrow, because they've been great conversations. In so many ways, you each have touched on the ways in which your families made space for your art and the ways in which you made space. Also that sense of responsibility, what has been passed on to you that you are now carrying, and the research that resonates. And I think, Professor George, you've talked about race and art and misunderstandings of all kinds. I want to ask if you would pass the mic to anyone who would like to start our conversation about how that phrase race, art, and understanding is resonating with you, based on the work that you do and or the folks that whose art you love. Race, art, and understanding. How is that resonating with each of you?
Well, I'll talk about the body of work that I have here at the Sedona Art Center right now. It's called By the Grace of God. And I got one of the professional development grants from the Arizona Commission on the Arts. And I was doing a residency. Actually, I was getting ready to do a two-person show with an indigenous artist. And we were doing a show about stories. So I'd spent a 3-month residency under a fellowship at Kansai University to study just the art of storytelling. I'm half African American, half Japanese. My parents met during the occupation of Japan during the Korean War. So I had a good idea from my dad because he told me a lot about stories from his life, and I didn't have as many stories from my mom. So I went there just to study different ways of telling stories because I was going to build a body of work there. And then I went to Venice on a residency because I wanted to learn how to create books because I wanted to tell my story in a verbal way, a written way, and a visual way. And when I went to Venice, one of my roommates told me that I should go to a little cemetery that was off on a different island. So I took the boat over, and I was really struck by the imagery that I was seeing. They had the large mausoleums. There's a lot of sculpture, which I really loved about Italy. But the thing that struck me most was that most of the imagery were portraying women crying over men. And then, because I was in Europe, everything was very Eurocentric. And I was thinking in terms of the idea of grief and loss and what it looked like there. And then this was during a time when, there were a lot of black men being shot. And a lot of times you saw women in grief in front of a microphone. And I really loved the elevation of what grief looked like when I was in Italy. And so what I wanted to do was create a body of work that elevated women of color in terms of the idea of grief and loss. And that's why I did the body of work, By the Grace of God. I just wanted women to have more of an uplift and spirituality in the look of what grief can look like. I didn't want to see it as a national spectacle, but something that was more spiritual in nature. So that's how the body of work got started. And I was actually doing interviews of women because, since it was part grief, part loss, part spirituality, I wanted to talk to women about, what they thought about grief, how, what their spirituality was, what that brought into the grieving process. And then I had taken pictures of the things that were most meaningful for me in terms of the sculptures that I was seeing. And so I was matching the stories that I was hearing from the women to some of the sculptures that I was most impacted by. So the poses that are in each one of the pieces are pieces that I saw from the sculptures, and then matched with the stories that the women were telling me about how they handled grief and loss.
Unfortunately, growing up in Phoenix, you talk about race and what it does to your art. Growing up in Phoenix in the 80s, race, you can't say race without saying racism, unfortunately. Me being a little black kid, painting, you get looked at differently, how you paint and what you paint. So if I'm painting people my color, some of my teachers are like, yo, don't do that. Straight up, just don't do that. Or if I'm painting something, or here's this guy, paint this person, I remember going to classes and doing assignments and being yelled at for my assignment looking some type of way. And a lot of my teachers were racist, straight up. It's just what it was. And me being a kid didn't really look at it too oddly, but it pushed me into changing what I had created. I started creating a lot of cartoons because they didn't have faces of color. They were green and pink and orange, and then I started painting a lot of comic books. And who knows if the subconscious had me paint comic books, because at the time probably all comic books I read was all white people. But it did definitely, racism did actually change what I painted. And so when I got older, I would go to galleries and shop my art, and I would be told that my art wasn't good enough. I would be told that I wasn't a good artist. And I looked at them, I was like, that's a lie, because I got talent, I don't know what you're talking about. So, but I would have to push myself other directions. But with that being said, I found out the hard way that even at this age I'm at, I still go to galleries and, let's not do him on this painting. Let's go this route. Let's just take him out and put some flowers. And these things are being said at galleries, and I understand being in Arizona that my culture is a very small percentage. I don't have the fact to be in New York or be in Chicago or being where black people are a little more prominent than just the 12% that's in Arizona. So with that being said, it was really hard to be an artist of color and push art of color. And I still find it hard to this day, being in Arizona. If you see a lot of my work isn't just all black people, just because I feel like and I've also been told it's not gonna sell. I'm in this to make money. I have to make money because it gives me money to buy another canvas. If I can't buy another canvas, I can't paint anymore. That's just what it is. At the end of the day, I don't need the money to say, I'm an artist, I made it. I need the money to keep moving forward what I want to do and what I love. So in that, I have to please the audience, please the masses, please what I'm being asked to do. So, you know, in my realm of how I paint a lot of stuff that has no color to it, because I've seen the hardships of what that brings of my art not being sold. So unfortunately, that's the fact of the matter. Me being in Arizona, who knows, might be different if I was in a different state or different city. But what I've seen to be painting for since '05 is that my work is not appreciated or wanted when I paint people of color.
That's really, I mean, I really enjoyed both of your stories. My painting, the paintings that I do a lot of street scenes, I do a lot of cafe scenes. And in most of the paintings I attempt to include people in my environment. So there are Black people, white people, Hispanic people. I even have this one large painting that says 4 parts of me that was exhibited here 2 years ago. And it's a Black woman, a white woman, a Hispanic woman, and a Native American, indicating that that is 4 parts of who I am as a physical being. But yeah, I agree. When it comes to galleries and things like that, I try to push those things that are less Black in content, even though I have a gallery down in Massachusetts who wants my imagery that is, well, that includes African American people. I'm kind of like in between in the sense that you've got your commercial galleries, but then you've got the research components that like you were talking about. And I also had a grant from the Arizona Commission on the Arts, a research and development grant, which took me to West Virginia, which is where my mother was born. Because my mother was born in West Virginia in Appalachian Mountains. And yet still in all of my academic years that I was teaching, I never heard of African American Appalachians. And I began to query. We used to, teach about Appalachian art, and there was, I think, the VISTA program or something that would send people to the Appalachian area to help with, the misery and difficulties. But they never talked about Black Appalachians. My mom would tell me these stories, how she lived in the hollows and how, my granddad worked in the mines, and, how she had to go to school through this tunnel, and, just little tiny stories that she would tell. And the last time I had been there was when I was 2 years old, so I didn't remember anything. So with this grant, my mom and I traveled back to West Virginia. We went to the city where she was born in Twin Branch, and then we went to Powelton, which was another city that she worked, that my grandfather had to move to because Ford closed the mines in Twin Branch. I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to feel and understand what she felt and understand. I wanted to go to the places, the place where her home used to be, the church that she used to go to, the tunnel she used to walk through, the city of Welch that the family would go to, which was like traveling to New York, for someone from Arizona. And Welch wasn't that far away, but it felt like that because they would all dress up, to go theoretically downtown, but it wasn't downtown because it was in Welch. And I wanted to do something with that. When I came back, I was like, okay, so you spent this money to go down there. Now what are you going to do? And I wound up getting a residency in Santa Fe. And that's when I began to paint the series, which is called Now and Then, the West Virginia series. I have completed I haven't quite completed it, but I have a solo show coming up at the Mesa Contemporary Art Museum, which will feature the 8 paintings from this series. And it's about the now and then. Each painting contains aspects of the past as well as aspects of the present. And so I want people to understand that there were the culture of the African Americans at that particular point in time, this is the 1930s and 1940s, was distinct and different from what you would find in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles. And so I'm basically in these series of paintings telling a story, and a lot of my work is narrative, because that's what I like to do. Even the one that's in the ones that are in the gallery in there. But yeah, it brings out the issue for me, the issue of race, of the neglect of a certain body of African Americans known as Appalachian Blacks. There's another term for it, but I can't remember what it is, so I call it Appalachian Blacks.
Thank you all for sharing, because in the beginning, when I first thought about race, art, and understanding, I kept trying to run in my mind, how am I tying that together? But through you guys' responses, it really did help me. And I like to kind of think of it as, or approach the idea of race plus art equals understanding. And I think historically, it is shown in all of the different things that we've seen. I've seen rappers rap and touch the souls of, kids, in trailer parks. I've seen it, so I think that they do kind of stem together. And I think one of the reasons why, when we hear race, we think racism. Not everyone, but I think that because it's from an origin of ignorance. And that's essentially what happens, is that we have this divide, and then we create this separation amongst each other because we don't have dialogue and we don't have understanding. And once that's broken through art in whatever fashion, be it music, be it an amazing series that I'm now inquisitive about Black Appalachians, and through our conversation prior to this, she made me more interested in thinking I should talk more about my history here in Arizona, where my family's from, McNary, and all these Black loggers that came over here in the late 1800s. So all of those type of things, I think, is why art is a part of that equation of race plus art equals understanding. It brought all of us together to be able to have this type of dialogue and to be able to create new ideas and to leave with new ideas. So we're able to develop that way. So just on that topic, and from what you guys all kind of give the response, that's why I like to share.
I mentioned earlier, let me just take a moment to thank you all for sharing these beautiful stories as well. It's really nice learning who you are. Thank you. Came to the Navajo Nation in 1987. Shortly after I arrived, Rodney King was assaulted, and what year was that? 81. Yeah. So a friend was interviewing me for a publication called the Etne Reader in 1994, and I told her that, having come from the South to the incredibly beautiful Navajo Nation and to be living amongst First Nations people doing the work I was doing, I felt like an escaped, enslaved person who had sought refuge in the Native community, as was happening in the 17 and 1800s. So when the the Rodney King event happened, it was very distant for me. I could see it on TV, but I was in a relatively safe space. And I was in that safe space for 36 years. So it's been interesting living in that space and moving into Flagstaff. I tell the story that over the past year while dropping my car, at one stoplight on one road, I've been called a nigger twice. So I'm very aware of race and the representation that I choose to put out as an artist, especially when I'm representing people of color. I want to celebrate the joy that I get to witness when I'm with them, and that's the imagery I attempt to put out.
Sorry, I tend to integrate what everybody else says instead of reflecting on the question. So, the thing that came to me when I thought about this topic is Sadia Hartman quoting Christina Sharp saying that care is the antidote to violence, in the context of Black people, in the context of what Christina Sharp terms as being in the wake, which is life experiences that you're attempting to integrate post-slavery. So I think in my work, I'm always attempting a version of care as an antidote to violence. One of the pieces in there I created during a fellowship in Rome. And one of the things that happened is that the cleaning people that were part of the fellowship were incredibly curious about my work and wanted to know why I was using materials and how I was using them in ways that actually reminded them of their relationships with the women in their lives, their grandmothers, their sisters, their aunts. And they said, why are you cleaning this dirty sheep's wool to weave into this piece? Why are you taking something that's just gunked up with nastiness and trying to recreate something else? This reminds us of what we had to do. We're not at the same level. You're an artist and we're at this level. And I said, I don't think we're at any different level. I mean, my grandmother wanted to be an undertaker, but she had to be a domestic because she was born in the 20s. So I think the care that they saw me taking and making one of the pieces in there and acknowledging that we all have a similar experience. One of the pieces features Dr. Marion Sims, who's seen as the father of gynecology, and 3 women that are in the room that are slaves that he had acquired to further the field of gynecology. So half the world has a relationship to gynecology intimately, and to realize that a lot of it is tied down to these women that are in this picture that most people can't name. Their names are Lucy, Betsy, and Anarcha. I created a womb for them to have in terms of the children that they wanted, the experiences that they wanted. There's a picture of me when I lived on the reservation and wasn't allowed on the church bus because I was a nigger. That little girl's crying in that picture. She doesn't understand race yet. She doesn't understand why, but she deserves care. So it's a transformative, a lot of my work is trying to transform a narrative utilizing this concept of care as the antidote to violence. I've totally lost the rest of what I was going to say.
Wow. This was a... Chip, you want to add something?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can. So one of the things that's really helped me kind of find myself in the Southwest has been reading histories of people who preceded us. I had an opportunity to work with Fort Garland Museum for 18 months, looking at the story of the Buffalo Soldiers. The 9th Cavalry was stationed there from 1875 to 1879. So my question was, okay, I'm an African-American man from the South who came to the Southwest, who has lived with Native people for 36 years. What must have been going through the minds of the brothers who escaped slavery, fought in the Civil War, and then came to take part in Manifest Destiny? But in learning this history, I learned of people like John Taylor, who originally came from Kentucky, fought in the Civil War, came to the Southwest as an interpreter for the Buffalo Soldiers, but who settled in southwestern Colorado and was the first non-native person in La Plata County. So when you think of Durango, John Taylor. But it's learning those stories of people who have been out here for centuries that gives me strength and hope in the art that I make.
I don't know what to add to all of what I've heard. Basically, my form that I see is that if we depend on galleries, and if we depend on the big buyers and sellers, that compromises the whole idea of what you're doing in your heart. And I think if you work with your heart and bring that heart into and through the mediums that you utilize, then other people will be affected in a possibly a positive way rather than a karmically destructive way. And I don't want to get into a lot of the politics of where our culture is going, but reflecting upon the indigenous people of the world, black people here in this country are the emblematic reflections that the world sees. And what we do is educate through our examples where democracy can go with this trial that we're somehow wavering on these days. And I think no matter what, I'm from the old Martin Luther King thing and Malcolm X and all that, so I'm from a different generation of people who had that optimism that burned in our souls so we could step out there and kind of exchange and not get hit directly and support those that took that direct confrontation and did suffer that. And that is the whole point, is education, and so many different ways to educate. Music to me is a fine example of how the particulate form can move within and without the soul and not being barred or prevented in any way of negative consequences. And I think that's really important. What we do is we put music in our speech, music in our research, and these forms integrate. You can't integrate anybody, you can't kill a group of people and eliminate them. That's not the point, and we know that. But there are other voices and power sources that are not really that concentrated on the end game. The end game to them is the funnies. You know, I mean, not the funnies in the old days, but the funnies now. You know, where all of a sudden they're successful, that kind of thing. You know, charter flights and boats, and, you know, fancy cars and stuff. There's more than that to our ecology, and the human ecology is full of the spirit that needs to have the voices that we all embody and work through, and not to try to limit yourselves in any way, shape, or form in what you can imagine to be the answer, because the answer requires that we all together make those voices clear. And for me, water and the elements of nature are already here. Native American power is already here. Everything we have is pre-existing here. If we can't get it here, ain't nothing going to happen on the moon or Mars. But they're going to try, let me tell you. At any rate, they're using their imagination, we have to use our imagination. The flexibility is most important, and moving through the global scale, because the connectivity is already there. We just have to get the fire and the music, and in particular forms that we take, we embody, we integrate, and we move outward to the spirit. And it comes back and forth in all the work we do, all the efforts we do. But we can't say it's for us alone. We can't say that. I can't say I'm an artist. You know, I paint, I do this stuff, but it's not even me that's working on that, because my work is never going to be ended. It's never going to be over. There's no finish. Finish is when we all do it together. That, I don't know where that comes from.
So that actually,
the English doesn't give me that, the ability to articulate.
that actually ties really well into our last question. So, thank you all so much. That was pretty amazing. Yeah, we're not done yet. One last question. So what, if anything, would you like to do with your art that you haven't yet been able to do? So what, if anything, would you like to do with your art that you haven't yet been able to do?
I guess the short answer is more of it. So, I'd like to do more, and I feel like it's like you said, it's giving and giving back, and kind of even to liken to Isse's point too, where I want to earn so that I can keep going, and mostly because I feel I'm being worked through, because we are all kind of one body, and likening to water, and I agree with you also too, that there's not enough English words for me to really articulate that point. But I definitely feel that if I had the ability to elevate, to higher platforms, to be able to do more of my work, to be able to put more of myself into my work, I feel like that would be my biggest contribution to being a human, to my community, to my family, and, hopefully to the future.
Wow. I'd say just ditto. But it's really, I think for me, it's getting my work out there to multiple eyes, not just the eyes here in Arizona, but far-reaching. And I think that is one of the things. I'm reflecting on it. I don't remember your first name. No, his first name. Isse. I was reflecting on what you said, and Amber and I were having a discussion about finding your niche, finding that place where people support, admire, value what you do. And there is a place for what you do. It may not be here in Arizona, but there is a place for what you do. And I think that that when you talk about what would you like, it would be to find that place where people admire and know and understand and can enrich what you do.
I know that I make work to make people feel less alone. I had a woman once from Ireland see my rope self-portrait in a New York show, and she said, I feel like you're speaking for generations of women who didn't have a voice. And it was the most intense compliment I've ever received. So I think that mainly I need to be put in situations of opportunity where I can continue to make that kind of work unencumbered. I'm a single mom, so it's important for me to get paid adequately, even as a Black woman, so that I can continue with that woman put on my shoulders.
For the last several years, for a long period of time, one of the things that I've loved the most, and I've just been thinking about it lately, is that I really love the dissimilar. I love looking at things and trying to find ways that put things together. We're living in a divisive society right now, and everybody has, taken their sides and, moved over to it. But because I, exist within two cultures, my whole life has been, how do I look at the dissimilar and find the commonalities and look from the perspective of those commonalities. When I look at my art, for years, I've been looking at two things, and this was interesting because George was talking about water. Water has been with me for a very long time, and I've been looking at it from the human standpoint and the power of water. And it's just been the last few years that I've been looking at it from the perspective of life and water. But I've been looking at, the idea of multiculturalism and identity on one side, and then the idea of water. And I've never been able to put them together, so I've been doing these two separate bodies of work for a very, very long time. And I mentioned, the project that I'm working on now, and it was the first time that I had that aha moment, because I love the dissimilar. And I've been trying to find ways to be able to put these things together. And I did this piece called Reconstructing, in a show called Reconstructing Home. It was the first time I started thinking about water and identity, because I was doing a piece that was an homage to my mom. So I did it related to the Obon Festival, since she had passed away, the idea of bringing the spirits back into your home, and then you let them go in lanterns on water. And then, Chip and I were in a show called Hope and Trauma, and my piece was about water. It was about the idea of consumption of water, So it was what we need and what we used. And that was, my whole installation was divided up in terms of what we need, and then I filled the rest of it with what we use. But recently I saw this, I've been looking at algae and microorganisms under the microscope, because my husband deals with, he has his own algae lab. So my body of work was looking at algae and creating these microscopic images. And there was one piece where there's a series of diatoms that work with algae. And it reminded me of the overview of a slave ship. And that was my aha moment. I looked at, it was like, I can connect the idea of what diatoms are and how they relate to algae in this relationship, and I can, connect it to my own start and what that image was. And so, when you say, what do I want to do? I'm actually doing it right now. I'm being able to connect my two interests and passions and put them together in this dissimilar manner, and connecting those things that allow us to connect them.
With my art, I want to touch more people, reach more people. I believe, I got something to say with my art. I believe I have something to be understood and heard, or even not understood, but be heard. I'm in the pop culture, and I love movies, and I look at movies and see how black people were portrayed in movies. And at the beginning of cinema, we had to be the villain, we had to be the slave, we had to be the butler, we had to be all these things that they saw us and wanted us to be. And I would love to change that narrative with my art. I would love for us to be seen as equals. And that's the hard thing with this world, not just being an artist, is being seen as an equal. I looked at everybody's work on the wall, and we're all great artists within ourselves, but I used to fight, I fought with the fact of being an artist, and then one of my friends took a picture of my art and posted it up on their page, and they were like, look at this black artist. I was like, why do I gotta be a black artist? Why can't I just be an artist first? But it's the narrative that we tell ourselves, like, we're black first. Yes, we are, but we're also all artists. I see that the rest of the world doesn't see it like that. The rest of the world don't see an artist. The rest of the world see a black woman. The rest of the world see a black man. That's what they see first. And then we're judged, then we have to get our arts judged. And I've hung myself, my paintings in places, and people would see my paintings and be like, that's racist. Thinking a white person painted it. I was like, I painted it. Why do you think it's racist? And they're shocked. They're like, oh, you painted that. Oh, why? And then they're taken back because automatically they think somebody's depicting something that they don't understand. Since they don't understand, it's racist. It's not true. Talk to the person who painted it, and I'll tell you what I was thinking when I painted it, and then you'll have a better understanding. But we're so quick to judge on our tone, we're so quick to judge other things in the world like our art, and they think they know everything without even coming to the source of finding out. So my whole thing is I want to be one of those artists in a museum to where you have the headphones and you hear what went on with that piece and why they did it, where they're at, what was happening in the world at the time, why this piece is that like that. That's where I want to go. I love looking at art, no matter if it's Picasso or somebody like myself who not even known anywhere. So I want to be just recognized as an artist that is trying to move this art thing forward. At the end of the day, not this people thing, not this color thing. I want to move this art thing forward and get recognized as an artist, and our art should be equal as everyone else's. That's what I want to do.
I like what everyone has said. It's really important that the voices that you hear and the voices that are inside of you are only really one voice, and that one voice gives power and strength. Even from this vision and sound, it should go out. Every town, every state, every complex city should have this conversation as a regular piece of their communication stream. It should be in the music, it should be in the poetry, it should be in all nomadic cultures, because people are looking at us. Even though we're dumb and we're really partial in this so-called American exceptionalism, which I have a problem with, the art form is a major form that's still free form, even though we have problems with it. In our hearts, we have to have that. It is time to connect. Keep the music, keep the string going, and I will continue with you. I'm 80 years old, so good luck. You have a lot more in time than I do. So therefore, we really have to work through that in a timeless way, because it's a bigger situation than we know. Because the voices that are not heard are the voices that share our concerns, and we voice and reflect and echo their concerns, and the earth is listening.
I'm the only one who hasn't answered this question, but really, there's nothing more I can add. No, yeah.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
All right, let's give them all a huge round of applause. One of our artists passed away this summer, and she touched many people, and so we're first going to show this quick tribute to Patricia Bohannon, and then we'll go from there. So. First and foremost, Patricia was an artist. It was clear from the moment I walked into her house that she had an unusual talent, an eye for color, a connection to people, and a desire to tell the stories of Black leaders that had been overlooked by history. I was wowed by her beautiful fused glass pieces as well as her incredible clay sculptures of women. And we've shown her work in our gallery shop ever since. Patricia has also been an exhibiting artist in vision and sound and African American experience for the past 2 years, and her work is featured again this year in the exhibits here in Sedona and in Goodyear. In her first year with us, she developed a series called her Visual Odes. These were mixed media sculptural paintings that lifted up several notable African Americans throughout U.S. history that had been overlooked by historians. Every piece she created for Vision and Sound was thoroughly researched and written about to include in our exhibits, but she was shy and she never wanted to appear on panels or discuss her work publicly. Patricia touched all of us at the Sedona Art Center and at the CSRD. Everyone loved working with her and seriously valued her talent, her positive attitude, and her incredible intellect. She was a true joy to have involved with us, and she's greatly missed. And I had the pleasure of speaking at her memorial this summer. So I'd like to call Ingrid up and be part of this. So we've created, you want to do this? Okay. So we believe that our Vision and Sound artists are carrying Patricia Bohannon's legacy, her joy, and her grace forward. And to honor her, we have created the Patricia Bohannon Award and Book Prize that now will be a part of our annual symposia forever. So the certificate that each of our artists this afternoon are going to receive reads in part, in honor of beloved Vision and Sound artist Patricia Bohannon, the Sedona Arts Center and the ASU Center for the Study of Race and Democracy recognize each of you as innovative and creative individuals whose work inspires and changes the world. So we are honored to have you here. We're going to invite each of you up to accept your award and then take a beautiful photograph with Ingrid. All right, would you like to say a few words?
Just listening to you all, first of all, you're absolutely right. You know, like my mother, she froze whenever she had to do the Zoom meetings, calls. And she knew what she wanted to say, she just couldn't get it out. But if you get her in a corner, she will talk your ear off about art. And you're like, okay, Mom, let's go. They're tired. But every single thing that each one of you said has been a conversation between me and my mother. Little bits and pieces. From each question, you know, race, art, and understanding. The reason why she started doing odes was because she just found it just fascinating that Black people have led the way in almost every segment of society, in every form, from the Black woman who owned her own hotel but was forced to wear maid's uniform because she couldn't be seen as the owner, or the human calculator in Virginia who could add up any number in the millions on the spot. The brilliance and the creativity, she wanted to showcase that, and she took joy in watching people's faces light up like, oh my God, wow, you got to be kidding me, I didn't know that. We didn't take joy in it, when my brother and I, because we had 2 sets of encyclopedias. There was not the internet, there's no Google. I was born in '61, so we had the encyclopedia to do research. And my mother felt that was insufficient in giving us the knowledge that we needed to know who we were, what we came from, where we came from, what we were capable of, and being able to stand 10 toes deep in that. So no, we had to study not only the green encyclopedias, they were brown African-American encyclopedias, and we were taught that every single day. We were like, is there more? The Black stuff, Mom, can we get the rest? And then as I got older, I realized that it would be a recurring theme, the conversations that we're having now my parents had in the late 60s, the same exact verbiage and wording. So I appreciate each and every one of you, your dedication to art. It is very challenging. My mother listened to every single challenge you guys face. She's heard the same thing, oh, your art is too black. Nobody's gonna wanna put that in their home, you know, the African with the big lips and the wide nose and the, you know, but they did. They bought it and they put it in their homes and they celebrated it. From the Mae Jemsons, and Dave Winfield has her art, to, there was a woman, gosh, I'm getting emotional thinking about her. Her name's Annette Thomas, and she's living with someone right now because she's in between jobs and she's trying to take care of her family. But she would put together any monies that she could to buy. It was important for her to have pieces of my mother's artwork. So this is a wonderful thing that you've done in memory of my mother. I'm not going to talk too long. And I'm very appreciative. It was very important. She was very excited and honored to be a part of the Sedona Arts Center. The day she fell, she was rushing trying to get on a call. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for continuing to celebrate her, and I wish you all your best and your success. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're just going to call each of you up to get your inaugural certificate. Dorrell, will you just stand here and we'll get a group photo? Okay, that's Jacqueline, Chanda.
Jacqueline, sorry.
And we're done. Debra, Edgerton. Jerome Fleming is with us in spirit, and we'll be getting him his certificate. Isse, Maloi. Good catch, sorry. Chip Thomas. And George Welch. And now we're going to ask all of the artists to come up so we can have one group photograph before we disperse.
Thank you.